Good morning, Craig.
Good morning.
We have received from the union 5 counter proposals, one being Article 20, Union Article 20 on injury leave. And
We gave that to you at the end of the day.
Right, and we haven't talked about it.
Okay.
You said you'd be ready to talk about it this morning. And then Article 10 base wages, 11 supplemental pays, 12 overtime, and 13 health benefits. If we could, since I have kind of had the opportunity to look at the injury leave a little bit more closely, can we go ahead and start with that one?
Sure.
That was on the email sent 4:40 on Friday for 17:20.
Okay.
So if you let me pull it
up. Do you want me just to describe it?
Well, I noticed on section 1A, okay, you put the addition of, on the leave of absence would include any additional period approved by city council, which is what the Civil Service Act provides for, and
Right.
it's just, right.
And that's voluntary. I mean, it doesn't require the city council ever to extend the 1 year of line of duty injury leave.
That's right, it just basically states what is required by the Civil Service Act.
Yeah, it mirrors the Civil Service Act 1 year
Right,
provision.
and then whatever light duties you've added in that, and thereafter for any period of light duty afforded by the city according to the fire department's limited duty policy, so that's up to the policy itself. As I understand it, you're not binding us other than what the policy says and what anybody would be afforded in the fire department under that
Right.
policy. This is the other section that is different from the last contract. The firefighter may utilize accrued sick vacation and personal leave as authorized by section 143073C, which is the Civil Service Act. The old contract stated that use of accrued sick leave after such leave, whether it was extended or not, would be up to the discretion of the fire chief. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any legislative history on that particular issue, and I don't know if you all have any that would enlighten us, but.
We don't. You know, that's a provision that apparently was put in there a long time ago. Undoubtedly pre-Odal, which is that Supreme Court decision that said that when a firefighter has a disability and they've exhausted their line of duty injury leave, the question was whether they could utilize accrued sick leave. In that case, I think the fire chief forced the firefighter out and wouldn't let him use accrued leave. And what the court held was
this Texas case?
Yeah, Texas Supreme Court. What the court was interpreting the Civil Service Act and said that the firefighter could, utilize his or her accrued leave. So the way I read this provision as it exists in the current contract, it looked like we were actually relinquishing a right that the Civil Service Act gave us. And I don't think that was ever intended. I think this is one of those provisions that, probably originated with one of the first contracts. We could go back and check and see when it first got in there, I don't know. But nobody on our side has a memory of it either. And so, obviously this affects very few people, but it can be very important to an individual. For example, an individual that is a couple months short of optional retirement, the 20 years or whatever it is they need to optionally retire, and would have to take a less than disability retirement if they couldn't utilize accrued leave to get them there. I don't think that the city really loses out by allowing the firefighter to do this. Under the current drag-it pay procedures, you would end up paying for a lot of that leave anyway.
Right, but it would take up, say for instance, they had a couple of years accrued sick leave, depending on what the limitations are, and we're without that vacancy for that long. Even though the firefighter was going to, if it was a situation where they were 2 months until they got retirement, that would be brought to the chief's attention, and I would doubt that the chief would not allow that two months to be taken in order to achieve that. But on the other side, when you have something that would put a vacancy out for several years, 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years, whatever the accrued sick leave is, then
Well,
there's an option. There's some due process that's provided within the Civil Service Act and within this contract itself that would allow you to come back within 2 years. Allows you to get compensated for your sick leave at the rate identified. So we're not really, there's nothing in here that's done to punish anybody. And it was a right that we have within the contract currently. So we need to look a little bit more
I hear you, but I want to push back against that a little bit. Well, it ties up the position. It really doesn't. I mean, you're a larger fire department, and almost every larger fire department carries vacant positions all the time in the lowest rank. And so, let's say it's a captain, and yes, you're having to pay move-up pay, but if you permanently promoted somebody, you would have to be, paying a captain anyway. So, and of course, we're going to get to the move-up pay in a minute, but because you pay less than the statute requires, I think, you actually make out on that. I mean, you're coming out a little bit ahead. And almost every fire department, carries a number of vacancies at the lowest level until they get a sufficient number of vacancies to warrant a class. And then they'll hire a group of firefighters. So that, so that's what happens there. You're not really losing a body in most circumstances. You can still keep the same staffing complement.
But it requires us to pay active pay. Say if it's somebody who's in a captain position, it would require us to pay acting pay for maybe two other positions, include the captain, and then moving up another firefighter into an firefighter 1 to a firefighter 2 position.
But that's what I'm saying. You actually come out ahead on that deal, because if you said, well, I'm not going to let the person use leave, I'm going to make them retire now, then you're going to have to promote somebody to captain, promote somebody to driver, and so you're going to make those promotions, and then you're going to permanently pay people at the higher classifications. Whereas by paying move-up pay, because I think you pay less than what the statute would require absent the contract, you're actually making money on that deal. And the firefighter is burning the leave, and then you're not doing that payout when the firefighter leaves. And so
you're not taking into account the position of the person who may be on line of duty, who may be using their sick leave. You're not taking into account the cost of maintaining and paying all the benefits and the salary and et cetera for that position while we're paying active pay. So I don't know that I agree that we would actually be making money.
Well, except that, if the person retired immediately, they would get, bracket pay for that vacation time, certainly.
And that's a one-time cost.
Well, it's a one-time cost, but I mean, it's like pay me now, pay me later sort of thing. But it can have definite impact on the firefighter in terms of length of service and, the annuity that firefighter may be able to draw for the rest of his or her life. So, and that's what ODL really, I think, was about. And so,
in ODL, was there a specific contract provision that provided for that? They were just, that case was just based on the Civil Service Act.
Right.
That wasn't based on an actual contract provision.
And
Because
you
you know
understand,
that we can waive rights throughout contract provisions, and that's what has been done here.
sure, and that's what I'm telling you. Yes, it appears that we have waived a civil service right that we have, but I don't think that anybody intentionally waived that. In other words, it's one of those things that happened because a contract provision that pre-existed an interpretation of the law continued to exist thereafter because nobody was, paying attention to it. And so we're just asking you to consider it. I want to point out that you really are talking nickels and dimes. You probably don't have more than 1 or 2 people a year at most retiring on disability. It is quite true that more firefighters become disabled than regular employees because of the nature of the job. But, you know, even so, we're not talking about, and a lot of firefighters, I would think, would exercise the option of going ahead and retiring early and getting their dragon pay. I mean, you know, it's not so,
Well, and I
you know, the
understand.
economic impact is pretty low. We're just trying to preserve for them a right that we feel that the statute affords them, that
Right.
in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really affect the operation of the fire department, doesn't really affect the operation of the association, but it may have it may be a key to that person's, you know,
Okay.
future
And
pension.
we'll have to look further into it, because as
Sure.
you know, there's a lot of other, contract, from the old contract provisions that we had looked at where things were done because it was either an oversight or a mistake, and it may have been more generous than what the contract afforded. And, I just want you all to consider that we have, at this point, we have TA'd certain things that have allowed those rights, whether, you know, even if it was
Sure.
a small economic impact, but like you have made a point earlier, it's a right that we have, just like the rights that you have been advocating for the fire union. So we're gonna have to look at that. I'll look at that case again, but I believe it's distinguished because that particular case was not dealing with a collective bargaining contract provision that had actually, you know, waived that particular right in your Civil Service Act.
You know,
We'll further
and
look into that.
I hear you, but I would really urge your team, you know, not to look at this as like a stand on principle, we're giving up something that we have. I mean, it's like that provision that we had the other day where we said, well, if a firefighter is actually killed in the line of duty, give them their accrued personal leave. And y'all said, no, we're not gonna do that. You know, that was something, we hadn't had a firefighter killed in the line of duty for like, I don't know, ever. And so it would have cost you nothing to do that. And it really spoke it really spoke to y'all just not really standing on what's important to the city, but rather it's just standing on, we wanna maintain the status quo.
Well, and I think that you misrepresented that a little bit, because when we were talking initially about this, about the personal leave issue, it was, we're gonna maintain the status quo in addition to what we were trying to deal with, and that was what we were trying to figure out, whether it was addition or not. So, at any rate, we'll just look further into that particular provision.
Only thing I'm encouraging you to do is really focus on, you know, the city's interest as opposed to just, you know, kind of a what do you call it, a automatic response that, well, we don't wanna, you know, change that. I mean, because this is one of those provisions, like the personal leave provision, that really costs the city nothing or next to nothing. And so if you're drawing a line in the sand, the question is why? And other than it's a right we have now, I haven't really heard. And I know you need to study it and need to talk to your team, and you may come up with other reasons. But I hope there will be other reasons if you reject
Obviously, it was a right that we most likely had to buy at some point, or something that we gave up, you know, that somewhere else that we gave up in order to, you know, as you know, these collective bargaining negotiations are a give and take. And
They
so
are, but
we
I
just
don't
have to
think,
look at it.
I think, as we've covered, I think this was a right that the firefighters didn't knowingly relinquish. Odal was decided sometime in the 90s, if I'm remembering right. So, and, you know, these contracts preceded that by a good number of years. Anyway,
Let's see, on section 3, you added basically, the notification of the pension. Well, all this looked, to be exactly what was in the old contract, is that correct?
right, and y'all had taken it out, and.
We didn't take it out, I don't think we just, I think we inadvertently left it off because we were working on, off of your proposal, which didn't have it included in there, and,
The way y'all's proposal read, it really sort of left the determination of whether a firefighter was permanently disabled to the chief. And while it required the chief to consult with a city designated physician, you know, ultimately the decision was the chief. And we want, you know, it really needs to be a medical determination. And the procedure, you know, this procedure is a truncated kind of version of what's in the statute, but we're agreeing to the truncated version because it is in the contract, and that is giving away a right that we would have in the, and we're continuing to agree to do that, so. Under the statute, as you know, the first step is to have the firefighter's own physician make a determination, then have a city-appointed physician, then the 3-panel. We're going straight to the 3-doctor panel.
Okay, and then section 4 is just outlines the leave benefits they would be entitled to, since it's not it's not addressing the drag-up pay on the other.
It's
that
not,
article.
and what my team is telling me, and I know you'll check it out with your team, is this is what they do for people that disability retire currently, and what they have done for some time. So the contract didn't capture it, but there were a couple of provisions in the contract. I think it was in a different leave section where it said this section, I think about the sick leave pool, this section doesn't apply to people that retire on disability. And so it kind of left it hanging like, well, so what does apply to people who retire on disability? So we put that in here to kind of shore that up.
So it's all right, you're claiming you have and you want to retain. Is that right?
The section 4?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that currently is being done and has been done for quite some time, which is my understanding, and your team members may tell you differently, but.
All right, then let's go ahead and look at the proposals you sent this morning. We'll start with 10, we'll go in chronological order.
What do we do, can we do health insurance since Steve's here?
Oh, do we actually? I don't know if you guys do. You want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah. Steve? There you go. Okay. Sure, let's look at it. Let me get it open. You know, we're very close in language. This is really for my own edification more than anything else. And Steve, I'm looking at what the proposal on beginning on page 2 and continuing on page 3, and actually going on to page 4. There's a rather long, like, section, you know, it starts on page 2. It says, and we've already pretty much agreed to the language with minor modifications. The following components will be used to calculate the premiums for active employees and retirees under age 65. And then it's got about 8 numbered points on the things that are taken into account. Right. And I see that those are the components that are used, but is there some kind of formula that these components are plugged into that results in what the rates are going to be? You know, in other words, you know, it says these are the components, but then it just says like stop loss premiums is item number 2. Right. And what I don't understand is how are stop loss premiums plugged in to calculate what the premiums are going to be?
So there is a overall calculation that's done, and it's, unfortunately, we have to take it piece by piece. So we take the stop loss costs that are associated with this plan, we plug in those costs. And it goes down the line, and it's a line item. You can actually see the true amount. So when we show a fund balance amount, you see what goes into it. So you'll see what the claims expense were, what the IBNR is, what all of these different components that are broken out here. Is it a set formula? It's not I wouldn't call it like a special formula that we built for it. It's just simple math. It's taking what true cost is, subtracting it from what we're bringing in revenues, and coming up with the overall fund balance.
And so, and I guess that's my question, is it a mathematical formula, or is it just things you take into consideration?
No, it's a mathematical. I mean, it's straight true cost. I mean, there's no subjective part about it.
So, you know, like, I'm looking at the old contract, and it actually listed out the premiums for employees in city, and I know those haven't changed over the life of the contract, right?
No, from the last contract, no.
Right. And so, I mean, how often do you actually like do this mathematical formula? Like once every 2 years when you do that, what you're calling the measurement period or something like that?
No, we're measuring this on a quarterly basis. I mean, we're actually measuring it a lot more often. We look at the data coming in monthly because this is a moving number. It's not a, today we tell you our claims utilization cost is, I don't know, 5 million, and tomorrow it could be 4.5. So it's a moving number, so it's constant forecasting of what the current claims data is telling us, so.
And if I'm understanding y'all's proposal right, at the time the last contract, well, I guess number one, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I mean, is there any way you could show us what that mathematical formula is? I mean, is that something you could put on a piece of paper and show us?
Oh, sure.
I mean, we're not really proposing much in the way of changes here, but I'm just trying to really understand. It's my understanding, I'm looking at this item number 8 now, and that's where we continue to have a small difference. The 1.6 million number that we've got in the cumulative net fund balance, and that's supposedly the fund balance to be used for the measurement periods. That at the time the last contract was negotiated, and I know health insurance was a big deal.
Right.
That you actually had a negative fund balance, and we selected the 1.6 million. And it's my understanding from my team that was because that represented about 3 months worth of what you anticipate are health costs.
No, that's the negative fund balance was coming from the fact that we were applying the overall GASB liability. And this was a lengthy discussion. So we said, you owe this much in GASB for the OPEB liability. It's putting you in the red. If you take GASB out of the equation, that's where that 1.6 was coming from.
Okay.
So it was a positive balance without it. So what we said was, we're gonna record what the current amount is, then we put in this step structure of how we were gonna collect the GASB amounts, and slowly remove those amounts so that we could adjust the fund balance.
Okay.
So essentially what this is, and it's probably easier to put it in a different example, think of it like a checking account. What we recorded back in, what was it,
2011, I think.
Was 1.6 million in your checking account. Now we're telling you, I mean, this is a positive for you. Now we're telling you, at the end of fiscal year 14, your checking account balance was 3.5 million. So I would think you would want that reflected, because all we're trying to do is record what the actual balance is at that given time. And the last time that we recorded it in CAFR, it was 3.5 million. And so that's what we're just trying to show is, hey, at this time when we're putting this in, you don't want to reflect an old balance that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that's.
Well, what is that? I mean, what's the significance of that number? I mean, it says the initial fund balance, and so right now the fund balance is 3.5 million. But if the fund balance dips below that, are there any consequences from that? I mean, under this formula?
No, because we address it elsewhere to talk about what happens if the fund balance, and if you go further down in that same section 8, and you go to where it says right above, what is it, section C, that paragraph that's there?
Yeah.
You see where we record the 1.6 million? That's actually where we say what's going to happen if the fund balance were ever to fall below 1.6 million.
Okay. So, I guess my question is what's the, from your perspective, what's the benefit, looking back at the first paragraph under item 8, what's the benefit of reflecting the 3.5 million there as opposed to 1.6?
To record what the true number was at the beginning of this new contract period.
Actual fund balance.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want to show an old fund balance amount. You want to show how healthy the fund balance is as of this contract.
And how is that, I mean, that number 3.5, is that the number that would be plugged in during the first measurement period? I mean, I assume I assume you already did a measurement at, like, in October of 2014? And was that the number you used? Was that 3.5?
That was the end number after we took out all of the different costs associated with the plan. That was the leftover balance. So that was their balance on their fire health plan.
Okay. And the high is And so the higher that number, the less chance there is that you would actually have or need a premium increase?
Absolutely. And so we had talks about trying to get that balance healthy so that you wouldn't be faced with that. And that's slowly what you've been seeing is that fund balance has been increasing, the plan's doing well.
Right.
So that's what's reflected there.
And the past cumulative recorded OPEB liability, I mean, in the old contract, it was 4.6 million, and now you're reflecting the new current balance as of September of last year, 3.2 million. Why has that number gone down?
So that's a combination of different things that are going on. During the last contract, we moved the post-65 retirees into a separate plan. We took them off the fire home plan. That removes some GASB liability right there.
Okay.
The firefighters are starting to utilize the wellness clinic that we have a lot more, so that's hitting their plan a lot less. I mean, it's a combination of things that they're doing now.
Can you explain that when they use the wellness clinic, is it actually reducing overall medical costs?
Yes, because that doesn't get billed to our administrators, so that's a separate cost altogether. We pay that separately based on premiums that are built into each plan, not just fire, but police and general employees.
Okay. But I mean, the overall claims, I mean, as a result of utilization of the wellness clinic, overall claims are going down.
Well, they're slowly decreasing or holding steady. We're not seeing an increase the way maybe other cities or agencies are seeing. I mean, we've slowed our trend of utilization because of the clinic.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. On the OPEB, it's at 3.2 as of September, right? Hiring 40 firefighters makes that number go up.
That's right.
Okay. And also, what's the magic number that we have to maintain for our premiums not to go up?
There's no magic number. The last time that we looked at this was at the end of the fiscal year. So that 3.5 million fund balance is what was in your account at the time that we recorded it prior to the 15 fiscal year. Looking at current utilization data, that number is still getting healthier. And so right now, what we're actually looking at, and don't hold me to this, I mean, we're still looking at numbers, we're still very early in the year, in the fiscal year, but the data's saying you don't need a rate increase at this particular time. And that's really gonna come back to where we talked about that we were going to continue to meet and provide you with those quarterly reports so that you know exactly how your plan is doing, and then we can have that discussion together. And those were things that we had talked about during the last go round. I know we haven't met recently, but the plan is doing fine. So
I know, but if for some reason we plug in the 3.5, right, and say your next measurement period where the number is 3, so we're below the 3.5 that we put in here as our actual fund balance right now, would that kick in an increase if we go below the 3.5?
No, that number doesn't generate anything like that. That's just to give you a point in time to say, hey, here's what we recorded as your fund balance.
Okay, and since we went from a negative fund balance back in 2011 to 3.5 in 2014 September, does that kind of tell everybody that our premiums are too high, and maybe we can work on fixing that, or should everything stay the same and continue to have our fund balance grow?
Well, you want to continue to have your fund balance grow because that is your
Right.
safety net. That's to keep you from coming into some kind of catastrophic event where now all of a sudden we need to come back and say, hey, we need a 20% increase or something like that. I mean, you want this fund balance to grow, not so much to the point to where the plan is just constantly making money.
See that, and by you saying that, that's kind of what I'm getting at. If we're at 3.5 and say we change the next third-party administrator, and all of a sudden the rate increases go up, are we able to buy that down to maintain the current premiums with the fund balance we have? Or is there that's what I'm saying, is there a number that we have to maintain where we can say, you know what, y'all can't buy that down up front, you're gonna have to increase your premiums? Is there a number that we have to maintain? So say our number is 2 million and we're at 3.5, and we're gonna have 12% increases, and we wanna buy down 6%, cause that's 1.5 million. So our increase would be 6% instead of 12. Just, you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
So
There's
what
no
is that number?
There's no set number. I mean, it's really just looking at this and saying, what are we comfortable with? And past history will tell us what we've done. I mean, essentially, what we hopefully want to get to is you want to be somewhere hovering around $5 million in your fund balance, just to protect your plan. That's essentially what it is. Is it a set number in place? No. I mean, if you're at 3.5 million, I mean, you're constantly seeing, right now, you're constantly seeing that number go up. But there's no set number where we're gonna come back to you. I mean, unless that number were to drop down again, all the way down to 1 million or something, then, we're definitely gonna have to talk about an increase. But right now, there's no set number that we have in place that we're gonna come to you and say, go down or go up.
Okay.
So I don't want you to think that 3.5 million reflects anything like that. I mean, all that number is just a true fund balance amount to show you what your current fund balance is. That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just looking at that first sentence. It says the initial fund balance to be used for the first measurement period will be the actual fire health insurance plan fund balance, but not less than whatever the number is, including restricted and unrestricted funds. That just means that and I guess you use the actual fund balance for every measurement period, right?
Right.
And so if that number, if the actual fund balance were for whatever reason to dip below 3.5, that doesn't have consequences except that you use the 3.5 number in the formula instead of the actual fund balance at that point.
Right, so when we're taking true measurements, I mean, we have to take the last number that we use. So we're not gonna go back and take 1.6. I mean, so that's all that's reflected, is to show what the current measurement number is.
For the first measurement period
Right.
after this contract. Because that's
Okay.
the current fund balance we have through the actuarial
Should you
report.
take out the words "but not less than," since it's an actual number?
I also have one more question.
Well, but let's answer
I mean, that's-
her
that's-
question.
that's the
I mean, what would happen
And it
if we
is the
just
actual
eliminated
fund
that
balance
phrase,
as
but
of
not
that
less
day.
than? Would that have any actual consequences?
No, it probably would, because we spell it out further down in that other section of what the bottom line number was that was agreed to previously
Yeah.
to take the GASB measurement. I mean, this particular section right here revolved all around OPEB.
And I'm jumping on you around, I'm not jumping on you. I'm jumping around on you a little bit. This, in each fiscal year through 17-18, we've got like 2% of past cumulative recorded OPEB liability. Where does that, I mean, if that's some sort of buy-down provision, right? We're actually setting aside money to fund the unfunded OPEB liability, is that the deal?
Right, so we took, and the current number is that 3.2 million, and so we said 3.2 million is the total GASB liability. Instead of just hitting that entire amount towards the fund balance, we agreed to take it a percentage at a time. This was the past fund balance, or the past OPEB liability. So what we said was, in fiscal year 14-15, we were only gonna take 2% of that $3 million and subtract that from your bottom line number to give you your final fund balance number.
I see, it's just really a math calculation. You're not
Right.
actually physically taking money from one fund and you're just saying, okay, when we look at what your fund balance is, whatever our cumulative recorded OPEB liability is, we're gonna take 2% of that and we're gonna deduct it from that, and that's gonna be the number we use.
That's right.
Okay.
And now we can show the math calculation, you would see it, but it's very, I mean, it's detailed. It's not going to be as simple as saying, oh yeah, I see it, and that makes sense. I mean, it's a very detailed number because we have different line items that go into that amount. So you're gonna see all of the different claims costs, you're gonna see all, I mean, it's not anything that's hidden, it's very transparent, but we can share that if you wanna see it. It's just not gonna be.
I would like to see the formula, it's just for my own edification. You know, I was an almost math minor in college, so things didn't work out for me, so.
But one thing I would like to point out is that the last time we were dealing with this, we were dealing with a $4 million, estimated $4 million OPEB liability and a $1.6 million fund balance. And that's where that negative came in, because the fund balance was way less than what the past OPEB liability was. Currently, last time what we did was we agreed to not address, to start catching up on the past OPEB liability starting this particular fiscal year. So that last fiscal year, even though the cumulative fund balance, as it was recorded in September of 2014 was $3.5 million, you still have to take into account that past OPEB liability is $3.2 million. So if you look at it that same way, that still, the fund balance is not covering that past OPEB liability, so it's not that we're,
Yeah.
the fund balance is covered everything. If you look at it the same way from the last time, the $3.2 million is taken from the $3.5 million, leaving not much in the fund balance. And that's why that scale was used.
And am I understanding correctly that that 3.5 number that's in y'all's proposal, that's not what the actual fund balance was? That's the actual fund balance less that 2%
Right.
of the OPEB liability. You actually had more money than 3.5 in the fund balance, but you subtracted, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000, which was 2% of the 3.2 million OPEB liability.
No, that was year 13-14. This schedule doesn't start till 14-15, right?
Well, 14-15 started this
The 3.5
October
was
1st.
at the
That's right.
end of fiscal year 14.
Did you take away any money for the past OPEB liability at that
Yes.
point? Okay, so.
So we actually have a little bit more than 3. I mean, not much more. It's just like 2% of the OPEB liability would be what, about
Yeah, it's not.
$50,000 maybe? Something like
And that number is different today than what you
Sure,
were funding.
sure, sure, sure.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, well, those are the questions I had. We're just, we're just really trying to understand, what we agreed to last time.
That's good.
The change to, what I've done, if you look on page 2 of the proposal, I just changed the name of it to what the quote-unquote official name is of the Affordable Care Act. And you had a thing about you would make the changes, and I think somewhere further down in your proposal you had about notifying or something. We just want to, we know that you've got to make any changes that are mandated by law. We just want to be able to have notice that changes are going to occur and to talk to you about ameliorating any adverse effects. And there may be none, or there may be nothing that can be done. Then looking at the bottom of page 4, only reason I crossed that out, that's not, is you in the 2 paragraphs above that, you said that twice already. So it just seemed like massive overkill to say it 3 times, but I left it in twice. So.
Before you move on that section, with regard to the, where was it? Oh, right here. On page 2, with regard to the plan changes mandated by federal or state healthcare legislation, the
Yeah.
old contract basically said the association will be notified of such changes. So you're adding in that we would have to negotiate with the association to ameliorate any adverse effects on the firefighters resulting from such changes. So you're adding that we would have to negotiate on that.
And you can counter that if you want, but the idea is that there may be things that can be done to ameliorate those adverse impacts, and we want to have the opportunity to exchange ideas about that, because obviously you don't want to visit hardship on your employees just because federal law mandates a change. We'll get down to the specific Cadillac thing in a minute, but and that's our goal too.
Okay,
So.
well, and I guess my question you a little bit further, just to get a little bit more clarification. When you say the word negotiate, is this like under the collective bargaining statute and the impasse procedure?
You know, in
that-
another proposal that I gave you, and I can't remember exactly where it is now, I actually said, yeah, it's a negotiation and we could even use impasse procedures. I'm not saying that here.
Okay,
So what I'm envisioning is something a little bit less than actual negotiation, like to impasse and use impasse procedures and that sort of thing. This is
so
more
this is
in the
more like
neighbor,
a meet and confer. kind
like a
deal.
sort of a consultation,
Okay.
you know.
Because I think it's in the best interest for both parties to be able to listen to each other. I don't disagree with that. I was just concerned, as to what that word negotiate really meant, whether it was a collective bargaining, commitment,
Yeah,
or
I mean,
is it
talk,
just-
offer us a different word if you want
Okay.
that. But our goal is, we understand that you have to make changes that are mandated by law.
Okay.
And
Good.
we just want to have an opportunity to try and make sure that those mandated changes affect us as little as possible.
Okay.
Also, I was gonna say, as far as the insurance goes, whatever's mandated by law, as far as negotiating, not like a full-out contract negotiation, but say we sit down with Steve and he says, look, this is what you have, this is what it's gonna be. And we said, well, and then there might be some ideas, say, what if you change this around or move this around where the effect is not as harsh, and we could do something like that, instead of just saying, this is what it is, this is what's gonna cost, without trying to settle something where it might be a cost savings on both sides, and that's basically, I think that's what that means.
Okay.
Moving on to the next major change, and this is, the Affordable Care Act Cadillac tax provision you'd had in there. This is where I talk about, and I'm already thinking past the proposal that we've made. Just my own research indicates that the chances of our plan if I understand right, and Steve, you may know this too, the actual Cadillac tax doesn't kick in until 2018, right?
Correct.
Okay. So that, under your duration proposal, that's at the very end of the contract period anyway. But, the idea that I have here, and whereas I put we negotiate to impasse about how to deal with taxes penalty, what I really think is that it's very unlikely that our plan will qualify as a Cadillac plan. I think we probably all agree on that.
I agree on that.
But if it does, I think that what we would want, I think it would barely qualify. And see if you jump in if I'm saying wrong or even stupid things. I think the idea is that we would want to negotiate changes to the plan itself so that we could get out of the Cadillac status. And that's sort of where your proposal was, look, either you guys pay it or we put you on the regular city plan. And I'm saying, no, there's a compromise there, if it happens, and it's unlikely, let's negotiate then and maybe to make changes in the plan to get it out of the Cadillac status.
Okay.
So that's not what my proposal says
Oh,
at this
but that's
point.
okay.
But that's kind of where I think is a logical place to head.
Okay, and I understand your reason, I'll let you know where our reasoning is. I know this is through negotiations, so we have to kind of figure out a way to how we can meet in the middle. But our deal is, number one, it's out there, so it's something that we have to deal with. We don't want to kick the can down the road. Number two, it is we believe on our side, currently, with the information we have at hand and available to us, that it's probably very unlikely that we will be hit with this particular Cadillac tax. But we don't know, with the ever-changing legislation and the ever-morphing Affordable Health Care Act, we just never know, So we just want to make sure that we both recognize it, we address it right now. Number three, you're right. It's going to be at the end of the proposed contract we have right now, which is at the end of fiscal year 18. But because that, as I understand it, that tax will be for the duration of that year, 2018. It doesn't take into account fiscal years. It will be due sometime in the end of 18 or beginning of 19, and they will use the entirety of 2018 to calculate that tax, so this contract would cover part of that. So that was one of the reasons we need to address it now. Number 3, yes, we'd be interested in changing the, number 1, the city, if we're hit with the Cadillac tax, and depending on what the thresholds are and the calculations are, this healthcare plan is already has a big cost to it. I don't know that the budget would be able to, and we don't know what that number is, so first of all, we wouldn't know how to fund it, number 2, we're already kind of tight as it is. So, if there's something that we can find that would change the structure of the plan to get out of that Cadillac tax plan, I think we would be interested. So I have to go back, and we need to look at this a little bit more closely and figure out where we can, meet in the middle.
Okay, yeah,
So,
I think there's a place,
Okay.
and I'm kind of getting my head around it, but we'll just wait and see what y'all's counter is. And then I think the last 2 sections, we're mostly in agreement. We're still asking you to consider an increase to the amount that you pay to we renamed it the Firefighters Dental Plan because that's what it really is.
Okay.
It provides dental and vision insurance to our active and retired firefighters. And, quite frankly, the $30 is not allowing us to adequately fund, and so
Do you have any information on, what like the plan premiums are, to give us an idea of?
It's not really like a dental plan, it's a supplement. So
Right.
say you go in and it's gonna pay 50% of, or 100% of preventive, or 30% of your eye exam, and even at those rates, it's running behind a couple of months.
So is this?
Can we get a copy of this plan document that has? the
Yeah,
payments?
let me, I guess the question I really have is this money that we're putting into this, what we used to be called a health and benefits trust, is this used to actually pay for a premium from an outside vendor, or is this used to actually is this used in an actual healthcare plan itself?
It's just for dental, and it's a supplemental plan.
It has nothing to do with health and benefits.
No,
trust.
I know, but do you understand what I'm asking, Craig?
yeah, she's asking, are we actually paying
A third
like
party?
what doctors charge, or are we buying insurance that pays what the doctors charge?
Paying the doctors.
We're paying the doctor's charge, and this pays a percentage. The employee pays his part, let's say
that the employee gets an eye exam, and the
Mhm.
eye doctor charges $200.
Right.
We pay part of that $200?
I think the max that they pay out is how much?
Probably about $60.
Yes.
Who do you use? Who's your
Whoever your doctor
I
is.
mean, what's your plan name?
It is the Corpus
It is
Christi
the
Firefighters Dental Plan.
That's what I was
It's
asking.
its own plan.
They don't use the money,
No,
they don't
it's-
use
No, I
this.
I know, they understand that.
It's completely self-funded.
Yeah,
Roxanne.
let me make sure I understand. This money that's used into the health and benefit trust, or what you're now calling the dental plan, is it's basically the coverage itself. You're not buying an outside insurance plan to cover.
Not even that,
It's a
there,
self-insurance deal.
yeah, in other words, you go to whatever eye doctor you want, or
It's kinda
dentist
a
you
health
wanna go
savings
to.
account, basically.
We're still gonna pay you $60 for this procedure, and whatever your doctor charges you, you're gonna pay the difference.
So it's like
Correct.
a health savings account that pays a percentage of whatever
Correct.
the fees are.
Right,
Okay.
and it's not even a percentage, it pays a set amount.
Up to a maximum.
Okay.
you
Is
know.
there anything that we could get with regard to a plan
I'll check
document
with
on
the
this?
guys,
So we can,
and, yeah,
so we can just know why this $45 increase would,
why
you know,
we wanna increase
Right.
to 45. Okay, let me see what I can
have a
find.
question, Rocky.
Yes.
Can you give me just a quick example, like if you went to go get something done?
Yes, sir.
What kind of cost would you be looking at? So, just in past experience, or if anybody.
I know my wife just had some dental work done. Number one, I think the plan has a per member maximum of $1,500 a year per member. That's the first kicker. My wife's dental work was about,
Your wife may not want you describing her dental work on camera.
I think it was right around 3,500 or so.
Say a friend of mine.
And I
I
think
think
my
so.
benefit from that was about $700 is what the dental fund reimbursed me, because I paid the bill, or we paid the bill. And, so it was about 30% or so. And that's changed over the years.
The percentages used to be higher, but because there's not that much money in there, they had to raise the, lower the percentages. So like dental cleaning, it would pay half, now it only pays like
Who makes
30%.
those decisions?
Yeah, that
Do you
was it.
hire
We have a
someone?
The
board.
trustees.
We have some trustees, and the really strange thing that's happened to us in the last probably 4 or 5 years is that that fund actually runs a negative balance. And
It takes a couple
I may
months.
get work done this month and I won't get paid until August. It's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Are all the trustees on the board that make these decisions, members of the union, or anybody from the city on
It's all union.
I think it's all union.
there? So this
I
is a
think.
completely union-run trust. The only, participation the city has is currently to make a contribution of $30 per month per employee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you get any outside assistance with forecasting costs or looking at future costs of what your balances are? You just kind of take it as, this is what we're spending today and this is what we have, kind of thing?
I think it's mostly, not really so much as anything else, but, how much money do we have that we can spend, and where can we logically set this, and so, like they said, in terms of percentage of their total cost, it's been going down, because this $30 has been consistent for a long time, and so, as things go up, they've been able to provide less and less of a benefit.
Have y'all ever considered using that money to buy a plan instead?
We'd probably need a pretty big increase from y'all in order to be able to buy a plan. And we don't think the chances of that are very likely.
Are y'all,
But you could certainly,
are y'all able to participate in the optional supplemental vision and dental health care plan from from the general employees? The general
No.
employees get from the city?
No.
I don't think
No?
so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Now, you have vision care now through our health plan.
Wait till.
Now you
Y'all
tell me.
know that, right?
What?
What's that?
No.
You have vision care through your health plan right now. So you
No.
get eye exams covered
I need one.
under a normal copay using your medical insurance.
Didn't know that.
Guess where I'll go tomorrow.
Get the word out to your members.
I can get y'all some info on that. just so you
That'd be
know.
great.
I need it.
Yeah.
I looked through my mind.
Yeah, you are squinting.
She tagged me on for free.
I look okay. I'm looking out. There's stuff here that gets
Oh,
me.
that's old age. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, let me see, is there anything else on? Okay, I think that was the end of 13, correct?
I think so.
So you would like to see the formula,
Yes.
and then if you could provide us with information about your plan.
That's.
Okay, we're gonna ask questions about, Article 10 now.
Okay.
Okay, and so on the ranks and steps, that's currently what they are. And in the reopener clause,
This is what, this is a version of what you had in the promotions article.
okay,
And I told you that I thought it made more sense to put it in the thing where they actually talk about what the classifications and steps are.
okay.
So,
One of the things, let's see, I need to pull it up, but, I thought when we did our wage proposal, on that first one, ranks and classifications, we actually had included a sentence in there, and this is actually found on our final 4/8/15 1 p.m. It was the entire collective bargaining agreement. But we had placed in there, the basic rank and classifications within the fire department shall be established by the city by ordinance pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code 143021 and its management right.
I put that,
Um,
I meant to put that in the reopener clause. I left
Okay.
out the section, but if you look at the first two lines of the reopener clause, the parties acknowledge and agree the city's agreement to this section does not waive the city's right under, it should say Texas Local Government Code, I think it's 143.021.
Yes.
I just didn't get the section in there. To
Okay.
establish by ordinance the classifications, ranks within the fire department, and therefore the classifications, ranks adopted herein may be subject to change. So
Okay.
I just
So
put it
that,
all in the.
that puts it all in
Yeah.
there, okay.
And that's why I read in A, you see it talks about the current ranks and steps as opposed to. We do have a negotiation provision in there. I mean, there are so many issues.
Yeah, we would have to deal with the step structure, we'd have to deal with, base pays. Ad pays won't really be affected other than if it affects some sort of ranking. I don't think we have any like that. And then
You know, one of the ad
eligibility
pays that's affected, I think that, or maybe it's just, I'd have to look at hang on a second, let me look at my Article 11.
The only thing would be acting out of classification possibly.
Yeah, maybe it's the current thing that talks about,
Those are the only ad pays that supplemental pays that would be affected. Cause we would have to reestablish what the, higher classes are.
there's something in the current contract about firefighters who are permanently assigned to EMS. And I asked my team what that means, and they said that's people that are holding the,
Firefighter 2 EMS.
Firefighter 2 EMS classification. So there's a stipend of as much as up, you know, depending on how long they've been in there, up to $100 a month. That, so that if you eliminated that rank, which quite frankly, we think that's the most likely rank that would or could be eliminated, you know, that there are a lot of issues that deal with that. I mean, holding that classification, you know, or not triggers, you know, your ability to go on to captain. It, you know, triggers a lot of things. So it doesn't, you know, it's not a different classification under your current contract from just the Firefighter 2 generally. Firefighter 2 driver and Firefighter 2 EMS get the same base pay, but it does involve this additional assignment pay. It does trigger certain promotion rights, a lot of things.
Right,
So
that's
it's-
why we wanted to make sure that we knew that, and that, y'all understood that we weren't waiving our right to establish the ranks and the numbers, et cetera.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, we understand that, you know, that's, I mean, the current contract, the way it reads, it kind of like establishes what the classifications are. And so this is actually, I think, a give on our part. That, you know, I mean, the current contract just says flat out, the basic ranks shall be, you know, it's mandatory. So, we think this is a give on our part, but it accords,
What page of the contract?
14, section 1, first sentence.
That's not the way it's ever been interpreted by either party, or that's not the practice that has been done.
Well, as you know from
So-
recent arbitration decisions, when the current practice in the fire department differs from the plain and unambiguous language of the contract, sometimes the plain and unambiguous language of the contract governs. But it's not a fight we need to have, because in this proposal, we're already proposing
Right.
to move away from it.
Okay.
But I'm just telling you that I think it's a right we have under the current contract. We understand, maybe even better than y'all do, that, you know, to deal with some of these problems that are popping up in EMS, we need to look at some changes. We really would like to do that on sort of a bilateral, collaborative basis. I think within my own team, we have some really good ideas.
And that's a subject that the Labor Management Committee could very well address and confer about.
It could, but you know, I mean, it's something that I think y'all ought to think about whether we need a little bit more structured approach to, because it's something that's coming up. I mean, my understanding is y'all are about to start a new class in May, and I hope that you changed. Oh, and I was gonna ask you, you know, I had asked in a previous negotiation session that if you wanted those people to maintain paramedic certification continuously throughout their employment, that you notify them of that before they walk through the door, because they would have been notified to the opposite.
Right, we're looking at that issue currently, and so I don't have a set answer or response, but we are looking into that issue and trying to figure out
What I'm hearing is the class starts in May, and so,
May 4th.
so, you know, you really need to tell those people, I mean, if that's an expectation you wanna put on them.
Well, we understand that. We understand that, we're just trying to figure out whether it's something that we can deal with currently, or whether we're gonna have to deal with the grandfather kind of deal, so.
Okay, fair enough.
So we're having to look at the Civil Service Act and what the procedures require, and what is fair. And, so we're currently looking at that, and, we'll let you know what is decided. But, on the reopener clause, I have a little bit of, clarification questions. Okay, we have that we will be going to, if the rank structure were to change, we would go to, reopen negotiations under 174, in order to address, base wages, step salaries, eligibility for promotion, any adverse effects, which would probably be, acting out of assignment pay, et cetera. And then such negotiations that they result in an impasse would go through the impasse procedure we have agreed to, and any change would be implemented only after the bargain is completed and agreement are reached. My question is are the negotiations during a contract term going to be limited only to that contract term and then reopened again when we renegotiate the contract again? Or is, in your version, is there gonna be an ability to agree to those beyond the contract term?
Well, I think the whole issue would be open to renegotiation when we renegotiated the contract, just like everything else is. So, I mean, if it's, part of the contract, then like every other part of the contract, it's open to renegotiation when the contract gets renegotiated.
Right, and I understand that, but I was just wondering on the negotiation for any change for the adverse effects that would happen within that term. In your perception, does that allow for the ability to agree to something beyond that contract term for base wages, et cetera? I don't know that would work, but.
I don't think it, I mean, you can do that. I mean, I'm negotiating a contract right now in a different city where we have negotiated a specific provision that actually outlasts the contract, okay? And I'll be glad to tell you more about that off record. I don't want to share their internal business.
No, absolutely.
But
I just want to be clear, because as I understand it, that would be for the duration of this particular contract. I wanted to know if the ability to do that is in there.
I think the parties by agreement could negotiate a longer length of time, but the thing is, we're talking about adverse effects, and once, a new system is implemented and people get used to the new system, those adverse effects should diminish over time. We're really talking primarily about dealing with any existing pay problems, any existing expectations that people have, if you go through Firefighter 2 EMS, for example, you can get to Firefighter 2 driver a lot quicker than you can going from Firefighter 1. And so, and then people studied to take that test and had certain rights. It's predicated on it, so how do we deal with all, a lot of them are grandfathering issues possible. But, so when you deal with those issues on a one-time basis, then a lot of those things are kind hopefully go away.
Let me tell you something that, you know, and this, I'll probably try to figure out a way to address it in a counter proposal, but let me just tell you where my concern is. That we reopen based on this, and we wanna reestablish base wages, et cetera, and then the fire union brings in a proposal to bring another raise in the middle of this, you know, during these open negotiations. And then, you know, 6 months later, the contract ends and we're reopened again, and they're gonna be looking for another raise on top of that. But, you know, I'm just trying to figure out the parameters from which you're proposing so that we can make sure that we understand it
Yeah.
and,
Well, you know, Roxy, though, remember that we've got an impasse procedure that we've tentatively agreed to.
Right.
And so whatever the firefighters do, you know, has to ultimately meet the reasonableness test.
okay.
You know, I mean, if we propose, oh, let's, you know, give some people a big raise here, and then, oh, the contract expires in 6 months, let's give them another big raise, the chances of our prevailing on that ultimately are probably not that good if it's not the most reasonable,
So
you know, of the
in
approaches.
In your perspective, the impasse procedure creates an accountability standard to prevent instances like that?
Yeah, and I think for both parties, you know, in other words, ultimately, we've identified factors that you have to compare your proposals against and determine who is the more reasonable.
Right, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying, okay. Let's see. And the signing bonus,
We're just, you know.
you just outlined what the actual dates were?
Right, we're trying to capture whatever the first year pay raise is, we're trying to capture some of what we've lost through the passage of time. We realize that you cannot grant a retroactive pay raise, and so this is a technique that I have used in other jurisdictions to deal with that problem. And let me just say about the wage increases, you know, the 1.5% we picked because that was the number that was put forward at that hearing, and we think that that's the number that the city budgeted for in this year. And the other numbers may seem high to you, but we have provided you financial data, and Corpus Christi is, I think, pretty far below market in terms of what it pays its firefighters vis-a-vis what other Texas cities are paying. Corpus Christi is kind of out here on its own, and if you want to attract and maintain quality people, we really do think you need to raise that up. We haven't lost sight of the fact that in the police contract, you know, you actually compare Corpus to a group of other cities, you know, and set them, I think, at the median of those. We've never done that with the fire department, and as a result, and we're not proposing to do it here. But as a result, we're falling behind, and I think using those same cities that the police department uses, we're like 21 or 23, something like that, out of 25.
Do you have that data?
We already given you that data.
Well, the data that we have was, you alerted to us it was incomplete and y'all were still working on it?
We've gotten, you know, everything that we feel like we can get at this point, you know.
So what you sent us is what, at that last time was what you're giving us?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. But, you know, it really, you know, with regards to base pay, I think it's relatively complete. With regards to cert pays, not as much, but we'll get to cert pays with the next article. But it really does show that Corpus is lagging pretty far behind in terms of what you pay. And, you know, I mean, ultimately, to continue that trend, I would suggest to you is kind of like penny wise and pound foolish, because if you train people and you lose them to other cities, and I know you put a provision in that says, well, we can recoup our training costs, and that may hold people for a couple of years, but that's not gonna, you know, in the scheme of things, it's not a solution, you know. That's the whip as opposed to the incentive. If you get pay and benefits up a little bit, you're gonna do a much better job of attracting and retaining qualified recruits. So we, you know, we didn't just pull pie from the sky. We didn't ask you to do what you're doing in the police department, that would, I think, result in a greater jump than what we've asked for, but we're asking you to seriously consider, you know, something more than what your last proposal was.
Okay, and the data that you're giving, that I'm looking at for the fire union is what was emailed. I see that you emailed it to me on February 20th, 2015, and it's, on the 24 cities that you chose, that mirror the police's 24 cities, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Other than, you using the 24 cities only because the police department here in Corpus Christi uses them, were there any factors that you use in choosing these 24 cities?
No. But, I mean, by the same token, if you have a different study of pay rates for firefighters in Texas, we'd be happy to look at that, and we'll do our best to confirm it, but, you know, I mean, Corpus Christi has a population of over 300,000, and so, you know,
Well, and yeah, and I was under the impression that what you had sent us was incomplete, but now that I know this is complete, we will, look through it, and we'll have some questions and talk through it.
yeah, there were two. One was a base pay comparison.
See, let's see. I wanna make sure I have all the proper data that you sent us.
We
I
sent
have-
you two Excel charts.
I
One
have,
was-
the one I have it's called Pay Comp 24 cities. Is there another one?
I'm not.
That's the only.
Roxy, why don't we
Yeah, just.
compare, I
Could you
mean,
just resend
it's
the-
25 Texas city base salary comparisons by rank 2014-15 is what the Excel spreadsheet, that's what I named it.
How many,
I
Is
don't
what
know
the
that I
Excel
have it.
spreadsheet says at the
how
top.
many pages is it?
Okay, the only one I have is the one, we'll compare
Do you
and.
mind sending it again, so we'll have the latest?
I'll be happy to do that.
And you said there
I'm
are
gonna
two?
make sure that I'm sending you the right thing.
And there are two of them?
Yeah, and y'all can do that during caucus if you need,
Yeah,
Okay.
so that you make sure you give us what, the right stuff. If you're using 25 cities, you know why there's 25, not 24? Y'all
We're,
add-
we're the 25th.
we're the 25th.
We're the 25th, okay.
Yeah, these must be.
Okay, so that was 10. And so you're basing okay, the 1.5 was because that was what we had presented at the hearing. And then the
We-
3.344 is based on your chart for the next 4 years after
The
that?
chart suggests that we have substantial raises for each of the next years. And, you know, quite frankly, if it were just what we need to catch up, it would be more than that. But because we realize that the city, has to budget these things, and, I mean, that's why we said 1.5 this year, because the city's budget is done, and we're not gonna ask the city to revise its budget. But at the same time, you know, to get us more competitive, we need substantial raises in the 3 to 4% raise range, and that's what we've asked. But
Do you know, I know you probably haven't looked at that chart, but do you know off the top of your head what you're suggesting that or what your chart suggests that the increase should be?
yeah, actually it does, but I wanna make sure I'm looking at the right chart.
Okay.
If I'm looking at the right chart, is this what she asked? She wants to know how much we need to come up. Is that it? It's, you know, Corpus Christi, yeah, I wanna verify that before I tell them that. Okay. But it's quite significant. And especially when we get to the ad pays, it's pretty But yeah, we took the 25 cities, you know, and I think the only ones I think of the 24 cities, we're behind 21 of them.
In base or ad?
In base, in ad base, I think it's probably, we don't have data for all of them, but, the ad pays, we don't have information from a lot of the smaller cities, but we do have information from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 other cities. And our information there shows that we're quite far behind. And I think there's a simple reason for that. And it's a kind of a startling reason though. And that is that if you look at the ad pays that you're paying under the current contract, they are the same ad pays, if I'm understanding right, that you were paying in the 1970s to the dollar. You have not raised ad pays for the fire department since the 1970s. You may have added some categories, I don't know, but what was initially set has never been changed. The guys on my team don't remember ever seeing their ad pays increase. And so while the ad pays that we suggested to you are, you know, some jumps, we think that they're justified by that and by the fact that for the cities that we're able to find data for, and you certainly can provide competing data, we're just behind, well behind in almost every category, especially as it pertains to paramedic and EMT certification. And that's why we have, in the proposal that we've made, although we've come down from our prior proposal, the biggest jump is in paramedic, and we're trying to create an incentive for people to want to maintain that paramedic certification. And I do want to point out one thing to you about the assignment pays. We went to the city's proposal on the ambulance assignment of only paying an amount per assigned shift.
Are we looking at?
I'm looking at section 3 assignment pay.
Okay, let me pull that up.
I mean, do you have any questions about section 1 or 2 other than what I've
Are we going
already?
to that?
Yeah, we're on 11. I do, but go ahead and talk about what you're talking about section 3 on the.
Yeah, you know, we went to, the way that they're doing it right now is if you're assigned to the ambulance, you get 50, 100, or 150. No, I'm sorry.
50 a month. Assignment.
Yeah. So, 150 a month if you've got a number of years and 10 years in.
10 plus years.
So, you know, we did away with that because y'all did away with it. And we went with your approach of actually assigned per shift. But it really only works for your most experienced people. In other words, they could lose money on the deal if we don't stay at the 50, and that's why we're pretty stuck on the 50. If you wanted to go to 25, then we would want to go back to the old system, which is, you know, just a monthly stipend. And we think it makes sense to do it per shift, you know, especially when you've got a situation that you've got now with some of our folks that they're working a whole bunch of shifts, you know. So, you know, that's why we're at the 50, but we're not, you know, that's a number that's pretty hard and fast for us if we're going to utilize that technique. The good news is we've got agreement at least on educational incentive pay. The next section is pay for higher class duties. And we have shown some significant increases there. Again, we think that the current rates are below what the Civil Service Act would require. And we've been, so we're trying to make that a more realistic number while keeping with the same way you've done it in the past, so that you have kind of a sort of a fixed cost to it. But we're open to counters, but obviously, but we're thinking that that the data that we've been able to provide reflects a need for some raises in these areas. We're welcome to counter arguments and things like that. We realize that the city's ability to pay is a factor too. It's an important factor.
And on longevity, you're just wanting to move it up $6 per month up to 25 years?
I think right
Okay.
now you're doing that for the first 15, and then you're doing 4
Okay.
for the last 10 years of employment. And it would be a small bump that would affect your most senior firefighters, obviously. The people that have been there 15 years or less, it wouldn't affect at all. It's only people that have been there somewhere between 15 and 25 years or more that would be affected by that proposal.
Okay. And then, Article 12, overtime pay. Okay, so you crossed ours out, it's saying, you're saying, okay, the use of the 7K work cycle in operations, that's pursuant to the Fair Labor Standards Act. The number of hours scheduled in one work cycle for operations firefighters will be 216 hours or 192 hours in the work cycle that contains a firefighter's Kelly day. That's 216 minus 24 basically, correct?
Right,
Okay.
right. I mean, they're just reflecting the reality. And I think somewhere else we've agreed that, the pay that you pay reflects the base salary that's expected for those work hours.
Okay.
So,
On hours worked, for purposes of determining entitlement to cycle overtime pay. When you're talking about cycle overtime pay, is that different from overtime, regular overtime pay?
cycle overtime pay is what I generally refer to as regularly scheduled overtime. A firefighter is regularly scheduled in a 27-day work cycle to work 212 hours. Under the FLSA, you're entitled to overtime pay for everything over 204 in that cycle. So, cycle overtime pay generally refers to, that regularly scheduled overtime.
Okay.
And so what we're saying is we're continuing the current practice, which is no leave hours will count as hours worked for purposes of cycle overtime.
Well, I know you crossed out Kelly days. Will Kelly days count?
No, a
Okay.
Kelly day is a 24-hour work shift off without pay.
Okay.
It's just, a Kelly day is given for the purpose of reducing the number of hours below the cap. Y'all currently provide 1 Kelly day per quarter. So that means I think there are about 13 work cycles a year.
Okay.
So about 1/4 of those have Kelly days. So they don't get cycle overtime pay during Kelly day. work
Okay, I
cycles.
just wanna make that clear. Okay.
Okay.
On, for purposes of this on section 4, you crossed out educational incentive pay.
And that again is to conform with current practice.
Okay.
It's my understanding that educational incentive pay is not added into the formula for either cycle overtime pay or other overtime or non-scheduled overtime pay.
Okay, and then you're talking about leaving the overtime pay calculation as it currently is in the old contract, is that correct?
That's correct. Where,
And it's basically it's a time and a half with certain ad pays included.
That's
is
right.
basically what it comes down to.
That's right,
Okay.
and it applies to unscheduled overtime. But at the same time, you know, the formula that's used, is something that, is my understanding, that the city came up with originally a number of years back.
Mhm.
It doesn't count all of the pays that you would count under the FLSA. It certainly doesn't count educational incentive pay.
Right.
I don't think it counts, move-up pay. But all of those things have to be calculated in the FLSA. But then it uses a formula that takes account of that and probably pays a little bit more than you would be required to pay under the FLSA. But it's not too far off, I don't think, because it doesn't count certain ad pays that under the FLSA would have to be counted.
Okay.
So,
Uh,
but it maintains the whole purpose of this. You know, I tried to make a couple of gains. I'm
Okay.
going back to the status quo, and that's what that last little note reflects.
One of the things I think that is, I didn't see, and it may be in, you know, it may need to be added to section 2, is the last sentence of my proposal. Sick leave, vacation leave, personal leave, Kelly days, and trades will not be considered as time actually worked for said, it should be unscheduled overtime calculations.
If you want to add Kelly days to section 2,
Well,
that's fine.
and that's what, that's my issue with section 2, you're talking about cycle overtime pay, which is scheduled overtime. There's nothing in your proposal that says when somebody gets paid for unscheduled overtime pay. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right now, you know, they're getting overtime pay for hours worked outside the regularly assigned schedule. If you call them in, if you hold them over, if you call them in on a shift that they're not scheduled to work and work them, they get paid overtime. If on the other hand, they're doing a trade, you know, they don't get credit for that. The firefighter that they're working for gets credit for that. And that's as it's
So-
done under the FLSA.
So a trade, let me understand this, on a trade, even though you're covering for somebody, the person you're covering for is the one that gets credit for the time actually worked?
That's right. Let's
So
say
if
that.
they came back the next day and covered somebody else's, you know, an unscheduled overtime shift, say where we're short somebody and then we call them in, they still get overtime even though they didn't actually work all their hours? Is that
That's true,
correct?
that's true. But you don't get to count those hours for purposes of entitling your own overtime. You know, let's say that Steve here, trades with Johnny and works for Johnny. Well, Johnny gets credit for those hours, not Steve. Then if you call Steve in the next day because you need an extra body, he can't say, well, I worked for Johnny, so you have to count that to determine my entitlement to overtime. He doesn't.
But Johnny can go and cover that, if they call Johnny back, he could get overtime, right?
I'm sorry, if Johnny,
So if Steve covered for Johnny,
he doesn't get overtime, he doesn't get any pay at all,
oh,
period. Johnny gets that pay.
and then when does Johnny make it up to, Steve?
Well, that's whatever the agreement was
Whatever
worked out with
down
them
the
and
road,
was
I have
approved by
worked
the
with.
fire chief.
So could they work it out where Steve would cover for Johnny, Johnny come back, make overtime, even though he didn't work all the actually work all the hours, and then he makes it up for Steve, and then Steve gets overtime the next cycle, kind of deal? That's an issue.
No, it wouldn't work that way.
But it allows that I'm not saying that it happens, but it allows that opportunity for,
Steve
for
doesn't have any
overtime.
more opportunities for overtime by trading with Johnny than he would otherwise.
but Johnny does.
No, Johnny
No.
doesn't. Johnny doesn't.
How is that?
Because Johnny only gets cycle pay if he actually works the total number of hours, and he only gets non-cycle overtime if he works an unscheduled work assignment, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with Steve trading with him. In other words, the most common example is if they both trade shifts, and the chief approves it, of course. They trade shifts within the same work cycle, it's a wash, right? They both work the same amount of time.
Right.
The
But what happens
example
when
you're
it's
thinking of
not in
is,
a cycle?
right, so let's say that Steve works for Johnny the last day of one work cycle, and Johnny works for Steve the 5th day of the new work cycle. Well, they each get credit for the time that they were scheduled to work, okay?
Right.
So, it's a wash. And even though Johnny actually worked 24 hours more in his work cycle, he doesn't get any overtime credit, he didn't even get paid for that extra shift at all, because that pay went to Steve, okay? And vice versa. Even though Steve, worked an extra shift in a work cycle because he was trading with Johnny, it's treated as if Johnny worked that time and Steve don't even get paid for that. They both just get their regular pay. It's a wash.
So if they do trades that doesn't allow them to get cycle overtime, is that where, do they still get it?
They could still get cycle overtime pay. That's true.
And
I
they
mean,
could
if
still
Johnny
get-
worked, if Johnny didn't take any leave and he traded time with Steve, and Steve worked he would get cycle overtime pay for that period, because he's treated as if he worked that time. Steve, on the other hand, worked 24 more hours during that cycle and he doesn't get any credit, overtime or otherwise.
And the
But
chief
then-
has to approve any trades?
Yeah, that's
Any
my
non-trades?
understanding, yeah, and I think the FLSA says that as well. Trades are approved trades.
Okay.
And if I could, Greg, if I go work for Johnny, the only thing that's different is I'm just helping him out. I'm not getting compensated in any way. I'm just covering his slot. I am Johnny when I'm sitting in his role. I'm just doing him a favor, and later he'll return the favor to me if I need him to work for me on a day.
Well,
That's,
there's only one John.
well, it's one of those.
You might wanna also add that these are rank for rank trades.
Right.
The trades you can't have a firefighter 2 work for a captain and vice versa.
Right.
They're same rank
Captain
people.
has to trade for captain,
Yes.
covered for captain, firefighter 2 EMS has to cover for firefighter 2
And
EMS.
it has to be approved by the chief.
Right.
Then let me ask on unscheduled overtime, sick days, vacation days, personal leave days, and Kelly days are not considered time work for overtime calculations, is that?
No, the way they currently do it, and I don't wanna hide from this at all, is if you work unscheduled, if you're called to work a shift outside your work schedule, you get paid overtime at the overtime rate, without regards to whether you're over the FLSA cap.
Okay, well, on page 7 of the old contract, section 1A, the last sentence of that paragraph,
Page 7?
right. Page 7, section 1A, describes a regular work shift for firefighter personnel assigned to fire suppression emergency medical service duties, shall be based on 24-hour shift, basically 24 on, 24 off.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last sentence says, for purposes of overtime calculations under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the city shall utilize a 27-day work cycle. Sick leave, vacation, and Kelly days will not be considered as time work for said overtime calculations.
For the cycle calculation.
Yeah, but look at page 8, the last paragraph. Any off-duty firefighters who are called back to duty or subpoenaed to give testimony in court shall be compensated at the rate of 1.5 times the firefighter's regular rate of pay from the time they're ordered to report to duty, and shall be paid for the actual time worked in that shift. I mean, what the part that you're reading is how they treat cycle overtime pay. The part that I'm reading is how they treat unscheduled overtime pay.
I don't know it's defined like that, but, okay, we'll look at it.
Okay.
All right, so
And I do want to make sure that you understand that I'm not asking the city to do anything in this proposal that they're not currently doing already. And I think it's been the standard operating procedure for
Remember?
as long as any of these guys have worked there.
It'll be 6 months from
Mhm.
since that,
All right, we're gonna, look, if you would, we've already gone through these, what I suggest is that we take a caucus, during that caucus, go ahead and send us the wage information that, you want us to look at so that we are
Okay.
both on the same page about what's your final information. We're gonna take that back and look at it, of course, with regard to the wage proposal and the wage data, there's a lot of analysis that we're gonna have to do, so we won't, we may have some questions later on this afternoon, but, we probably won't get back until, the next session on presenting our, you know, our stuff and looking at your stuff, et cetera.
Okay. There
But-
are a couple of, items that you could,
Right, and
Give
that's
us-
what I was gonna look at. What we're working on right now is, we're looking at the injury leave, trying to get a counter proposal out to that. We're working on it currently, and the deputy chief counter proposal, deputy chief and assistant chief counter proposal, and health, the health plan. We're gonna
Okay.
see if we can get enough information to try and get that counter proposal done today.
okay? and-
So I'm just giving you a kind of a very loose agenda of what we're planning on, trying to achieve today, because I know that we're probably much closer on the injury and, deputy chief and assistant chiefs, and of course, you know, the wages has a lot of analysis. There's gonna have to be a lot of discussion about that, so we'll make sure that everybody has what we need in order to have a fruitful discussion on that.
Okay, I still think that the civilian employees article is
Oh.
one that we could easily get agreement on.
Okay.
You said that you want the association rights article, which is Article 9 in my proposal, to be, part of the compensation,
Well, part of it
discussion,
is,
but
I-
a lot of it doesn't have to do with the only thing that,
It's
I guess, is a money
the president's time
piece.
off is
Mhm.
probably the one that is directly tied to compensation. What I can do is I can try and get you a counter proposal on the stuff that we can work on now,
Yeah.
and, we'll work on that. So
And
we'll-
also, weren't we pretty close on that Article 14, other supplemental benefits?
We could, what I think I will do is give you what we can agree to, with the exception of the amounts. You know, like, we do agree there's a uniform allowance, we just have to work out the amount, and,
That's right.
and so I'll give you a counter proposal on that, just leaving those parts blank.
Okay.
But everything else, I think, there may be a couple of provisions we need to look at with regard to seniority and things like that. So, seniority staff assignments, which, is in the old contract, so we'll work on trying to get all that stuff done today, and then we'll,
Okay. We're here, so
I wanted to let you know that I believe that I just need final confirmation, but, I think we talked about May 6th and 7th being the next negotiation sessions. Del Mar is open, but they're just confirming what rooms they have available, and I need the final confirmation from them. Just an FYI, Del Mar, CCISD is having some large thing here at the Del Mar Economic Development Center between the weeks of, May 11th through 15th, May 18th through 22nd, and May 26th through 29th.
So this facility won't be?
I'm not so sure the facility will be available. I'm not gonna be available, I'll have to get you my availability because I will probably be out, May 20th, and then through the rest of the next week, I'll be leaving out of town. So I'll send you that just so we can, account for all that. If we have to find another facility, for that following week during May 11th through 15th, we'll start working on that.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'll
We
just
should
let
wrap
you
it
know.
up on May 7th.
Yeah,
Keep
I
hope
wish,
alive.
I wish we could wrap it up, so that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay, thank you all.
Probably the POA.
Y'all ready? Okay, before we go into, we've sent you two counter proposals, a counter proposal to injury leave UA 20 and UA 32 on deputy chiefs and assistant chiefs. But I also sent you just a little while ago, because we just got all the final numbers, or got the numbers, excuse me. We sent you information on the City Care Fire fund balance. in an Excel spreadsheet. And I know I just sent it to you, so you probably need time to look over it, but, just wanted to
Yeah, I
bring your
haven't gotten it
attention.
yet, but I,
Okay, well, let's go over, the counter proposals, and hopefully it'll go through by the time we're done with those. I think we're very close on, let's start with the UA 20 on the injury leave.
Okay.
What we did was, on section 1, we're basically following what the government, or for the Civil Service Act, calls for with regard to the leave of absence with regard to the line of duty injuries and what was, status quo currently in the old contract. You added, in that it would be for a year, if any, if necessary, and you added for any additional period approved by city council, and we added to that at full or reduced pay, because they have the authority to do so. So we just merely wanted to reflect what the rights are with regard to city council when they do consider and
yeah,
approve such.
that's not a problem.
On the second, the next sentence after that, I was kind of having trouble understanding, and I think the intent was, as I understand it, that if, I changed an after to including, because I believe what the intent is that we both understand, both parties agree and understand that under the law, the leave of absence for line of duty, injury or illness is 1 year. But it's not one calendar year, it's a total of 1 year that can be used intermittently. For instance, somebody can be out on a line of duty leave for 6 months, but then the next 6 months be put on light duty, or maybe even longer.
Yeah.
And still be able to, say they were put on half days or et cetera, that limited duty, they would work limited duty, but the gaps that they would have would be covered by that line of duty leave of absence up until they go up to the year.
So you're just saying the limited duty and the injury leave might be interspersed?
Right, and then that, even if you exhaust your leave of duty, you still may be, even if you exhaust your leave of absence, you may still be able to go on limited duty, and at that point, then you can use your sick leave, personal leave, vacation leave, et cetera, because I think that's the way it is anyway. Is that right? I think that's the way it is. So I just did, the way it was written, it said thereafter and after, it seemed like you had to exhaust your leave of absence and then
Before.
exhaust light duty before you had to do that, and I don't think that's what the intent was. We don't wanna place a burden on a firefighter who has a line of duty injury or illness. So at any rate, we went ahead, and although it's a right that was afforded to us in our old contract, we went ahead and are changing this to allow anybody who has exhausted their leave of absence, whether on light duty or not, to utilize their accrued sick leave, and I actually meant to leave in vacation
Okay, so that,
and personal leave as authorized, and only as authorized by 143.073C, because there is a caveat, they have to not be able to gain pension benefits, and I wanted to make sure that that was understood. I think if somebody is able
you got
to.
your statute, didn't
Yes, sir.
you? Go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't want to change, we wanted to make sure that we both understood that it was pursuant to what is authorized by that 143.073C, and there weren't any additions or limitations to that. And then we added, upon recertification by the city designated physician of the line of duty illness or injury. That's just because there can be a long period of time that goes on if you exhaust your leave of absence. It can go beyond a year, it can go beyond 2 years, something, it's just depending. And if we get to a time where that leave of duty is exhausted, we just want to have the designated city physician just recertify, yes, this is continuing.
now, let me look at the statute in the Odell decision, I'm trying to remember how that works. So,
yeah.
I'm not sure I understand that last phrase though, that if, obviously if the firefighter recovers from the line of duty illness or injury, he'd either have to go back to work or.
Right, and this recertification is just basically the firefighter going back to the city's designated physician, who I believe is Dr. Center right now, and just kind of a checkup, and the doctor saying yes, and he continues to have this injury and this is still considered line of duty, and so you know, utilize it, just recertify that it's still continuing, is all we're asking.
Okay, I think I understand what you're. Now, the city designated physician, is that a city employee, or is that just like somebody you contract with? Or?
Yeah, it's, as I understand, it's not a city employee, it's a doctor, it's the doctor center that we actually have a contract with, and they do all of our, our drug screenings, for example, physicals. We have no control over the actual doctor, he's independent.
Okay, but it is just one doctor, it's not like a
There's a group of doctors.
doctors.
There's a group in there.
It's a group.
Okay.
So it's not, if one doctor's not available, that doesn't mean that we can't get, it's through the doctor center and whatever doctor is available, as I understand it.
Okay. Okay, so, and I put vacation back in because you said you had meant to take that
Right,
out.
I actually meant to change that because we were looking through it, and if we're gonna go ahead and do what, if the firefighter wishes to use their vacation for sick leave, then, we really, and for limited duty even, as I understand it, that's what the way it's done anyway.
Okay. And this is Article 20.
Yes. And I think that was the big point of contention, actually, the Section 1. The other, like Section 3, I capitalized designated. I changed a little bit. I just changed a little bit of language just to reflect, or make it clearer. This stuff shouldn't be substantive. It's just instead of saying prior to finally making the determination, I changed it to prior to taking formal action on the permanent disability determination. It's just kind of clarifying language. So-
Sure.
Roxy, how are we doing it now when somebody's hurt in the line of duty? And it's probably more of a question that would go to Richie, but how do we do it now? When somebody's hurt significantly enough to where they cannot work at all, they're placed on a no-duty status. Say our captain who had his shoulder separated and got 2 or 3 surgeries, he's placed on a no-duty status. How much no-duty status are they allotted?
That's a 1-year leave of absence with any extension by the governing body, which would be the city council. And then after that, if there's any limited duty or any vacation, personal leave, or sick leave they want to use before they are on temporary or permanent leave, they can utilize that according to what we're placing on the table.
If after 12 months of no duty status, are they afforded the ability to go to a 12-month of limited duty status?
If only
In an
if
attempts to recover, to extend that recovery time?
I'll tell you, yeah, only of course if if the city's designated doctor
A small limited duty.
says that that's something that is based on reasonable medical probability and something that's not within any of our control, upon a doctor's determination. And after a year, exhausting the year leave of absence, if he is put on limited duty, he's going to be put on limited duty to whatever the current policy is. And I think there are some limitations on the months. I can't recall specifically.
Remember, Richie?
Not off the top of my head as far as that particular circumstance. I'm trying to think of an instance that was exercised, and I can't think of one off the top of my head.
But that you would also be able to utilize sick leave, vacation leave, and personal leave to help cover what you can't cover with limited duty. you know, if there's any gaps. If,
In
say
other words, you exhaust the 1 year of no duty and you can't go to limited duty, you'll be allowed to use.
Right, or you can also petition the city council to extend that as well, and they can do so, they have the ability to consider it, they have the ability to grant it, and they can they also consider whether they want to do it at full pay or reduced pay, depending on the budgetary, whatever the operational and budgetary constraints are.
And this is for an on-duty injury where somebody's hurt in the line of duty.
Right, whatever we're talking about right here is only an on-duty injury.
Okay. But when you talk about reduced pay and using their own leave for a non-duty injury, that's where I get a little confused with it.
It's once every single
Thing is
leave of
exhausted.
absence is exhausted.
Okay.
That's when we start talking about using that. Prior, the contract actually gave us the right to say, at the end of exhausting all your leave of duty, whether it be the year or any extension, the injured firefighter could petition the fire chief, and at the chief's discretion, he would allow him to continue using any accrued sick leave. That was what the old contract said, that was a city's right. But now what we're saying is, okay, we're gonna go ahead and give that up at this point and allow the injured firefighter to utilize not only accrued sick leave, but vacation and personal leave as well. And that doesn't have anything to do, if they happen to separate from the department because of a permanent disability or for some other reason during that line of duty absence, that doesn't affect their drag-up pay that they still get, that's already outlined. We didn't intend to change any of that, and I think the way that it's here, I think we've agreed to it. I just added, you know, that how the payments would be calculated, which is pursuant to it's exactly the old language in the old contract.
Okay, we'll look at it. I think we're close. So.
But I think this is something we could possibly, it's 4:30, we may be able to TA today, if not first thing.
Yeah, I'll go back and talk to my team. I don't know,
Okay.
I need to kind of take their temperature on it.
Sure.
Okay, you wanna talk about the deputy and assistant chief?
Yeah, on the deputy and assistant chiefs, we're a little bit further apart on this. We have we both have a different view of the rights that we have. Under our understanding, under the deputy chief's position is basically any rank that's under the fire chief. Under the Civil Service Act, it says that the chief may appoint a person in that position, in any position that's open. That means that the fire chief has the ability to not have a deputy chief position. Or if he wants to have deputy chief positions, he may appoint persons as approved and is authorized by the city council according to the rank and the numbers under those ranks. So we believe that the way that you have proposed it, where you're limiting us only, you limit us and you give us a number of appointments, but you include the deputy chiefs in there, that you're taking away our rights that we currently have in order to appoint a deputy chief at that point. So what we would like to do is to retain that right. I'll let you know that right now if we add a deputy chief position, it's an additional position. It's not gonna be taken away from any of the other ranks. It would be an addition. And that's really the big difference that we have between everything else is we still, we both agreed to the assistant chief on the 2 appointments and the salary of the deputy chief and the assistant chiefs.
Do y'all have any current intent to appoint additional deputy chiefs?
I think that the chief, I don't know for sure, but I think the chief would like to appoint one additional deputy chief, and it would be an additional position. He would not be taking it from any of the ranks below.
I should have told you this the other day when I made the presentation on there's a real strong disagreement about what section 143.014 means. I know that there's an attorney general opinion out there that says that a city that is a collective bargaining city has a right to make multiple appointments to the assistant department head rank, which in your case would be the deputy chief. The state association has always taken the position that that's not correct, that in fact, if you have collective bargaining, that although the statute was clumsily drafted, that the bargaining history makes it clear that a city that is a collective bargaining city can't appoint assistant department heads without the agreement, or without a collective bargaining agreement giving them that right. In fact, if you read that Attorney General opinion, he talks about, you know, one submitter said this, that's me, I'm that submitter. And I did a real pretty extensive bargaining history research of that, and it's clear that they used the word subsection when they meant to use the word section, or vice versa, I forget which. And we pointed that out to the Attorney General, but ultimately weren't able to persuade him. But that said,
And unfortunately, there isn't a case law
No,
on this either.
there isn't.
All we have to rely on is the Attorney General's opinion, what the context of the statute itself, and the contract that we have currently, so.
No, I know. I think ultimately, at some point, we're either gonna get the statute amended, or we're gonna contest that Attorney General opinion in court. Because, we believe that it takes important rights away from collective bargaining cities that the legislature meant to give
Right.
them. But I don't think we have to settle that in this contract.
Well, let me tell you what, from my perspective, where we're coming from, we're a little bit concerned that if we make, if we would agree to the last proposal where you said we could appoint one, we could appoint one or two deputy chiefs, and the rest of the deputy chiefs would be promotional positions, that we would in essence be giving away our right to be able to appoint somebody to deputy chief. Our intent is not to have 10 deputy chiefs or anything like that. Right now, the current plan is, as I understand, that possibly they're looking at maybe one more deputy chief that would be a brand new position, and would be, of course, as I understand, promoted from within, okay? The thing is, what I don't want to happen is, we have an Eagle Ford Shell kind of deal here in Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi doubles its population, requires that the fire department doubles in size in operations, and then we may need a third deputy chief. I'm just thinking out loud and of course making just theoretical kind of situations, but in that situation, we would want the ability to say, okay, we need, we're gonna create a vacancy, and within 90 days appoint, promote somebody and create a new position, so.
Yeah, and of course, we renegotiate these provisions every time we renegotiate the contract, whereas, I don't know if I hope for you that you double in size or not. I live in Austin, which is a city that's experienced rapid growth, and it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
There are some fun aspects to it and some that are less fun. Traffic being one that comes to mind quickly. But, between now and 2018, the chance of your fire department growing substantially, I thought we struck a kind of a balance, because we would let you shift the deputy chief appointments up. In other words, you could have 3 deputy chiefs under our proposal, you just wouldn't have any appointed assistant chiefs. And I guess that's what you,
The problem is it feels like we're giving away our right to make those appointments by making the others promotional, when within the Civil Service Act and even the Attorney General opinion, it states that we have that right to do the appointments.
yeah, and of course, that the Attorney General's opinion doesn't have the same kind of force of law that a court interpretation
Right,
would
and
have.
unfortunately, we don't have that here
Yeah.
either, so. But they do really take into consideration, if it ever got to a court, they do consider, the Attorney General's opinion.
I know, and if all I had, well, and I'm not trying to argue my case
Right.
with you, if all I had was the Attorney General's opinion, then I would say, yeah, that's pretty persuasive, but I think that the Attorney General's opinion runs counter to the clear legislative history, and there's a line of cases that say when the legislative history is clear, that even inartful wording won't, preclude the courts from giving effect to true legislative intent. Now, so what I'm saying is I don't think we can predict with any certainty what the law really is. And I'll be happy to share the brief I gave the Attorney General with you. I mean, I'm not trying to hide the ball, and the legislative history that I gave him, it didn't persuade him, but boy, I was really taken with it. I'm just looking for some middle ground here. I need to talk to my team. I understand your proposal, but let me make sure that my team understands your proposal. I mean, really, you could have, this gives you unlimited appointments at the deputy chief rank and 2 additional appointments at the next lower rank, which is assistant chief.
Right, but they would have to, any vacancies would be new, and they would have to be approved by city council. Any new vacancy,
Any new vacancy at the deputy chief
Right.
rank would have to be new.
well, right now, anything, we would have to do it through the ordinance, just as we do all the classifications. So ultimately, the city it's not just us saying, we're gonna have 10 deputy, it has to pass city council scrutiny and approval.
Oh, I understand
Okay,
that,
so-
but I mean, you could, for example, let's say you had, like right now you have let's say you have 1 deputy, 2 I think you got 4 assistants.
Right.
And I don't know how many batch chiefs you have, 7, 8, 9, 10?
10.
Okay, 10. You could say, well, we want to create 2 more deputy chiefs, so we'll change that to 4 deputy chiefs, and we'll reduce the number of battalion chiefs by 2 to 8, and we would end up losing promotional positions in that sort of scenario.
That's not the intent. I can't promise you 20 years from now what that fire chief is gonna wanna do. And of course, we'll have gone through a couple of cycles of contracts at that point, and that's an issue that will probably have to be visited then. But I'm telling you, the intent now is not to take away from the ranks below. It's in fact to try to add. If a deputy chief vacancy is in fact added, it would be a brand new position, additional to whatever is already out there in the rank and file.
You wouldn't reduce the ranks of the other classified ranks to get the spot for the deputy chief.
That's
is what
correct.
you're saying.
That's our intent at this point.
But there's nothing in the language that says that.
No, there is not.
Okay. Well, let us look at that, and I need to talk to my team and see kind of like what their feeling is about it. I
Okay.
understand the proposal, so.
Okay.
Okay, and I did get your email on the health insurance. I opened it up, and
Did it?
I wish I could make it bigger. Steve, you actually read stuff this small? Does it appear like this on yours?
Pretty big, no?
No, mine. Do you have a view? You can zoom on the view. Do you have a view? You're Word, but you're on Apple, right? Is there a view tab at the top?
Let's go to 125.
Okay.
Hey.
Not too bad.
There you go.
Okay. Okay. So are y'all gonna give us a counter on the health insurance today? I mean, we were very close.
Yeah, we're real close. We're actually waiting to look at these numbers as well, just so we can make sure that we were on point. There's a couple of things that, I need to further analyze with regard to the Cadillac tax and the proposal to negotiate. We're really considering that.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
We're really considering that, but I need to talk to a couple people, before I submit my, counter proposal.
Okay, that's fine. Steve, can I ask you a couple of questions about the chart? Just, I'm looking at row,
Are you looking at the summary chart, or are you looking at the side-by-side?
I'm looking at the summary.
Okay.
And, so, I'm looking at, 9 and 10, there don't seem to be any numbers. The net OPEB obligation per actuary.
Right, and I don't know if we have a footnote that says why. The reason there's nothing there is because that goes back to the contract where we're not taking out the entire OPEB obligation.
Okay. And, So it looks like the fund balance, which was at about 3.5, has grown pretty healthily since then. It's now at a little bit over 5 million.
Right, and if you, let's go over to the next one. If you look at the side-by-side comparison, where you can actually see where we started at.
Is that the change February to
Yes.
March tab? Okay, hang on a second, let me zoom in. Okay.
So if you look at this, and if you look at, hopefully it falls into the same on yours, but under column C, you can see the 3.5, that's what we talked about
Mhm.
from the 9/30/2014.
Right.
And then, of course, going all the way up until now. So there are some things listed below that are affecting these numbers. And these numbers, again, I can't stress this enough, these change daily. But we had an influx of pharmacy rebates come through. And that really pumped up the fund balance because it put money back into the fire health plan.
Okay. So you would expect that number maybe to go down a little bit at the next reporting period as we work through those.
Right.
Thanks.
If we, yeah. But these numbers are gonna move. I mean, it could move according to anything. I mean, we could have a $1 million claim hit tomorrow for a procedure that's done. That would really affect these numbers. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen. You could see the number be even more healthy than what it's reflected as right now, so.
Yeah. So net OPEB obligation for actuary is still blank, but then current year OPEB expense is listed as 209,501, and that hasn't changed. What does that number represent?
So we take the current year amount of that 3.2 million, and that's how we determine what the actual, we break it up.
Oh, is that the 2% of, no, that wouldn't be 2%.
No. It's the actual OPEB expense per year.
For that year.
Okay.
And then what we're doing is we're taking a small percentage, and it actually won't hit until the end of this fiscal year, where we're paying back the net OPEB obligation.
Okay.
So really, if you wanted to look at this, the real way to look at this would be, okay, so if, as of right now, we're showing a little over $5 million in the fund balance.
Mhm.
But if you take out the net OPEB obligation of 3.2 million, that leaves you with really.
1.8.
Right.
Okay. But that's like accounting for the whole.
That's counting for everything.
Okay.
Which, if you're looking at your plan, that's how you want to look at it. Even though you're not paying it right now, you still want to look at all the future expenses that could possibly hit your account.
And so does that OPEB liability, I mean, I know we talked about it went down when you took a bunch of 65-plus retirees off, and then you expect that it would go up a little bit as you add 40 new employees. But then as people retire and drop off, then maybe it goes down a
That's
little bit
right.
again. So it really is just kind of fluctuating based on like enrollment numbers.
Correct. Right.
And so like if somebody, let's say they work for the fire department and they quit after 8 years, and there would be no OPEB liability for them at that point because they didn't
Retire.
retire.
Right.
Right, okay,
Right.
so,
And then there's other things that could change it. I mean, if for whatever reason the fire department decided, well, we're no longer going to subsidize our retiree premiums and they're going to be a standalone group, then that in turn would eliminate OPEB altogether.
mhm. Okay. Let's not do that.
No,
Okay. Well, so what I'm looking at is, right now, we've got a pretty healthy health insurance fund.
right now, yes.
But of course, I can tell you're a glasses half empty kind of guy.
Right.
So you're worried about, yeah, okay. Okay, very good. So we'll wait for your proposal on that.
Okay.
I think we probably can't get back to you today on the injury leave, but I'll have it
Okay.
ready for you
Sure.
at the start.
And I have confirmed, May 6th and 7th, same place, same time. I'll do the postings tomorrow and
Okay.
email them to you.
Okay, very good. Well, thank
All right,
y'all.
well, thank you too.
Thank you.
Mhm.